Some 4,500 former NFL players want to settle concussion-related lawsuits. In the settlement, the league would pay the plaintiffs $765 million. Previously, the league had denied any wrongdoing when it comes to the safety of its players. The lawsuits charged that the NFL hid known risks of concussions for decades. Senior U.S. District Judge Anita Brody still must approve the settlement.
Mike Webster was a Hall of Famer. And I thought even more of Mike Webster than that. I thought he was the best offensive lineman that's ever put on pads. A real stand-up guy who would do anything for you, and he had an incredible sense of humor, and I just remember his brain. You know, he was so smart. The way things ended up was just beyond tragic in my mind, because he was a great father, a kind guy, an incredible football player, and a really bright mind.
The manifestation of the symptoms came on so strong and so quickly. I mean, when we were in Kansas City, he was a different personality. Pittsburgh, he was showing the start of it. Kansas City, he was a different personality.
Everybody that plays football gets dinged here, there, and maybe multiple times without necessarily realizing how serious it can be. And the idea of accumulation of multiple small hits is a very important concept, because it's pretty clear, I think, that this is a significant potential source of serious problems like Mike eventually had. I mean, he was very pleasant, very charming, but didn't have the drive and direction and the decision-making ability, and this is what gets destroyed in this process of repetitive brain injury. He was pretty much at sea in an open boat unless somebody directed him. By the time I saw Mike Webster, I don't think he could have handled grade school. He just was so significantly impaired that he just would not have been able to get through or get anything out of it.
It was interesting with Mike.
You felt, I don't want to go against this doctor. I don't know if I need this surgery. I don't know if I want these drugs. That you wouldn't say anything because you don't want to upset the team.
Well, see, but that's a lack of boundaries. Let me tell you something. There's a lot of codependency going on. You know, there's this thing where the team looks at themselves as your father. And it's kind of weird, because it's like, you do this for the team, right? And it's really like a cult. I have to say, you know, the NFL is a cult, because you've been looking at this motto and this logo for your whole life, and you believe in it, and you're like, they wouldn't do anything to hurt me. They never would. And maybe they would. Maybe, you know, it's so, you know, and when you give your life over to something.
We may be finally on our way to final approval of a settlement between the NFL and thousands of retired concussion plaintiffs. This preliminary approval was granted today by Judge Anita Brody, overseeing this concussion case in a court in Philadelphia. She originally decided against preliminary approval, but the settlement was revised, the major difference being a cap on the funding for future retired players was removed. There is no cap now. A $765 million settlement is no longer. There is no cap on the funding. Now it moves through the process. Preliminary approval, notice to all retired players to come forward, possible objections to this where players can opt out and sue the NFL on their own and not be part of this settlement. And finally, final approval, which we expect in about 6 months or so. At that time, the NFL will finally be writing checks towards retired players based on a grid formula of their injuries and their neurocognitive impairment and how long they played in the NFL. But the good news is we are finally moving towards approval of this historic concussion litigation against the NFL.